Bell is even closer to developing his harem, having newly acquired the SS rank weapon his new friend made especially for him. The next morning, the adventurers prepare to go into the dungeon again, and Hestia realizes that Bell had left early in the morning to the dungeon, as the day is his big day. Bell, on the other hand, begins to fight some pack of wolves, and then he notices it is very easy, seeing that he has more hands in his party. Therefore, fighting monsters will be easy. Meanwhile, in the marketplace, Hermes and Asfi begin to talk about the adventurers and how long it took them to level up and begin to argue about the matter. Suddenly, Hermes pats Asfi to calm her and appreciates her for all the efforts she has put in. But she tells him to give her a break, and they both head into the tavern for some food. Meanwhile, back at the dungeon, other adventurers are fleeing from danger because of the rabbits that are trying to attack them. Meanwhile, Bell and members of his party also find themselves surrounded by the monsters, only for Bell sees that the quality of the monsters have increased and they have become more powerful. Suddenly, the other party that were running away from their monsters passes by Bell and his party members, letting the monsters that are coming after them to also begin to run after Bell and his party, which makes them run for their lives. But then, Bell tries to stop the wolves with his fire bolt, but unfortunately, his friends sustain an injury from the attack, but he tells Bell that he will live. Suddenly, they hear another noise coming from the cave at which they came from, and all of a sudden, they see more monsters coming out from the cave and continue to fight them. At that moment, Bell begins to show a sign of weakness, which allows the dungeon to collapse on them. Seeing that his men are injured, Bell immediately rushes to help them, only to discover that they are trapped under the rocks and there is no way to quickly rescue them. Then he sees a wolf that shoots fire from his mouth, which makes Bell realize that the middle floors are very strong. Meanwhile, when Hestia sees that Bell and his team have not returned from the dungeon, she immediately sets out to meet the people at the entrance of the dungeon to ask if they have returned, but they tell her that they have not. Then, she orders them to file a quest to find Bell and his party members. Bell, on the other hand, manages to save his party members from the wolf and the fire, with the help of the wool given to him by Ina. Having escaped, they continue to walk until they realize they have arrived at a dead end. And there, Krazo tells them to leave him if anything happens as he is dead weight. But Bell tells him it will not be possible. Therefore, he should not think about something like that. Then Lily gives them a solution as a last resort due to the fact that they need to come out alive. She tells them they will have to go down to the 18th floor so as to tag along with other adventurers that are leaving, and they can go down through the rifts. Hearing this idea, Bell accepts and tells them to go deeper into the dungeon. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the adventurers that left the monsters for them to conquer alone are being questioned and scolded by Hestia, who tells them that if Bell and his party do not return, she will not only hate them but also hold a grudge against them, but begs them to help her. Immediately, they all agree to help her as they begin to plan out the search party. While they contemplate on how to go deep into the dungeon, Hermes suddenly appears and tells them that he has come to help out in the search for Bell and his party members. Hearing this, Hestia agrees immediately, as she seems desperate to save Bell and his teammates at all cost. She also decides to go in herself, but they remind her that it is forbidden for the gods to go into the dungeon. But then, she tells them she can go as long as no one finds out. Also, she tells them she can feel that he is still alive, as the blessing she has given him is still there. In the dungeon, Bell and the others carry a very smelly bag with them, so as to prevent the monsters from coming near them. Suddenly, they see a wolf and Krazo uses his own fire magic against it, which makes it blow up itself. Meanwhile, as they plan to advance deeper into the dungeon, suddenly they hear an earthquake, and when they look, they see another huge minotaur approaching. Angrily, Bell begins to battle it alone, tearing it to pieces, and uses the weapon obtained from that minotaur to take down the remaining 3 monsters, which surprises everyone, as they wonder how he is able to do it. At that moment, Bell suddenly immediately falls to the ground and begins to breathe heavily as he is very exhausted from the battle. Krazo, on the other hand, freezes as he becomes surprised at how he was able to take down the monsters with a very low level. Later on, Bell and his teammates become very exhausted from battle, after casting spells over and over again. Meanwhile, the other gods and the adventurers begin to go deep into the dungeon, as they also battle monster in search of Bell and his team. The other adventurers become very surprised after seeing some real power from some of the strong prayers amongst them. They continue to go deeper into the dungeon, and suddenly, they notice a collapse and begin to climb onto it, so as to know if Bell is there or not. There, the gods notices they have lost most of their equipment and suggest they might be dead, as their chances of surviving in the dungeon is very low. Meanwhile, Asfi tells them that there is a high chance that Belle has descended into the 18th floor, which they all agree to, and decides to go to the 18th floor in search of the teen. Also, Asfi informs them that there are refs all over the dungeon, and that is how they will go down to the 18th floor. At this point, Hestia begins to pray that Belle is still alive. Meanwhile, out of exhaustion, Belle's teammates have passed out, leaving only him, who has also exhausted his powers from attacking the monsters. There, Belle begins to think about what he can do, and knowing that he cannot leave them alone, he decides to pick them up and begins to walk down into the dungeon. On his way, Belle sees a hole he thinks is a way out and jumps down with Lily and Krazo into the hole, only to land himself in another room. During the search, Hestia asks Hermes why he is interested in Belle, and he tries to lie about it, but she tells him to say the truth. Then he tells her that someone is interested in him, and he is also interested in Belle, which explains why he has come this far to meet him and see with his own eyes if he is really the one to shoulder their era. On the other hand, Belle continues to struggle while carrying his teammates as he finds himself in the room, and wonders where he is and what the room is. Then he becomes confused on whether it is the Great Wall of Sorrow, as he begins to think if he should make the decision and go in. But then he realizes he has no other way, and he begins to advance forward into the cave. Suddenly, the cave begins to collapse on him, which makes him try to move faster so as not be crushed by the falling rocks. All of a sudden, he sees a monster coming toward home, which makes him begins to run towards a hole nearby, and fortunately, he is able to jump into the hole before the monster gets to him. He falls down into the hole with his party members and realizes he is in a place filled with grass. With the little strength he has, he tries to look for his friends but immediately passes out. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a building and sees that the person by his side happens to be his teacher that taught him how to fight A's. He asks her what she is looking for in the dungeon, and she tells him that her family stays there. Then, as Belle tries to get up, he mistakenly falls on her small melons. Immediately, he removes his face from her melons and asks of his friends. She shows him his friends and he sees that they are safe, which makes him thank her for saving them and taking care of them. Then she tells him that her commander has instructed that they come see him as soon as he is awake. Getting to the commander, he commends Belle for making it to the 18th floor on the first day and congratulates him. Also, he promises to look out for him as far as he is a friend of his. After they head out for a walk, where they see two girls who begin to tell Belle of how great his fight with the Minotaur was, and one of the girls flashes her melons in front of him, which surprises him. Later that day, while Belle and Ice head out to get something to eat and they take a walk, Belle begins to ask how the inside of the dungeon is bright, while they are inside the it. Just then, he sees a very bright light and notices it is a light in the tunnel. Then, Ace begins to explain about the crystals and how it all becomes night when time passes by. At night, Belle sees that it has gotten dark and also sees that his friends have woken up and wonders where they are. They begin to call out to Belle who tell them that they are okay, and they both begin to apologize to him. They apologize for weighing him down and slowing down his mission, but he tells them it is not their fault, as they did their best also in saving their lives, as those hellhounds would have roasted them all if they did not help. At that moment, Ace comes to tell them that dinner is ready, surprising them, as they wonder what she is doing in the dungeon. However, they head out for dinner, and on their way, they are recognized by other adventurers for their sacrifice and bravery. At that table, they begin to eat and joke around, after Belle realizes that the food is delicious. Later, the two girls from earlier comes to ask Belle about how he got all his skills to S level, and in the process, they make him feel nervous again, but Ace gives him a very tough facial expression that makes him keep quiet. Then he hears a noise and look what it is, only for him to look sees that it is Hestia coming down to the floor he is in. Meanwhile, immediately she sees him. She rushed to him and began to cry, thinking she has lost him. Seeing this, Belle apologizes for getting worried, and tells her that it will not happen again. Then he sees other members of the search party, who comes to apologize to him for causing him to be in the mess he found himself in. Having apologized, Lily and Krozo suppose that if Belle is okay with it, then they are willing to let the issue go, seeing that their lives were at stake too. Then Hermes insists that they come up with a plan after what has happened, but they realize that some other adventurers are fighting Goliath so that they can head back to the surface. Asfi, however, tells them that they have a day to relax by telling them to go and rest. That night, while everyone is asleep, Belle is unable to sleep and decides to stare at the crystal. Then he sees Ace and asks her what she is doing up this late, which she replies, stating that she saw him awake and wanted to make sure he is okay. Hearing this, he asks her when she is going, and she tells him it is after they have left. Then, she asks if he would like to see the town, telling him there is a town in the dungeon. Learning this, Belle becomes surprised as he cannot wait to see the town, and begins to wonder what it will be like. Suddenly, Hestia comes in and thinks Ace is trying to hit on Belle, which makes her argue with them. However, Hestia becomes tired and asks Belle if where they are going is not far, but he replies that they will soon get to their destination, as he helps her to walk. Hestia adds, as she gets angry, that she does not understand how their private date turned into a group hangout. Suddenly, Belle places Hestia on his back, and at that moment, Lily calls him to come and look at the beautiful crystals. Belle admires the crystals and asks Hestia if she also thinks the world is beautiful, which she replies that the world is indeed beautiful.
Oh my God! Wow!
While they stare at the crystals, Hermes looks at Hestia's beautiful rice cakes, and he immediately smiles at them. Soon, the group enters a small village called Rivira, created by adventurers. There, they all see a sign that says they can trade in the village. But when they all check the prices of the goods in the village, they realize that the items are very expensive. The Amazon girls also tells Belle that lodging in the town is as well expensive, which explains the reason they have been camping in the forest. Suddenly, Belle remembers that he has not seen Hestia, and when he asks, Ace tells him that she is at the perfume shop. Meanwhile, another adventurer named Mord gets angry on seeing Belle as he tells the rest of his crew that he would teach Belle a lesson. But the other adventurers immediately tell him that Ace is around, therefore he should not try to do anything stupid. Suddenly, Hestia runs to meet Belle and shows him the new perfume she just got, which he commends of smelling nice. Then Lily scolds Hestia that she is not being reasonable because she bought the perfume at an expensive rate.
Yep.
Few minutes later, all the ladies decide that they want to go and have their bath in the lake, but Hermes goes to meet Belle that he wants to have a word with him later. Meanwhile, Bates suddenly sees Belle and begins to get angry as he asks himself why Belle is also with them. As the ladies go to take their bath, Hermes takes Belle into the forest and tells Belle to climb the tree for a better view, and when Belle checks, he sees the ladies having their bath as if they were all naked.
Did you pray today?
Seeing this, Belle gets scared as tries to tell Hermes that this is not right. But suddenly, Belle falls into the lake and becomes shocked at the views of the different sizes of melons and rice cakes. Belle becomes embarrassed bringing this situation, but Hestia goes to meet him and tells him to enter the lake, where it is only her so that he would not have to see much. But out of fear, Belle runs to another side of the lake, and there he sees Eyes, who uses her hands to cover her floodgate and her perky melons. Realizing his mistake, Belle apologizes and immediately runs out of the lake into the bush. There he hears the flow of water, and when he moves further, he sees Ryu, and immediately apologizes as he tells her he didn't mean to peep on her. However, Belle walks with Ryu, who tells him to pay tribute to the dead members of her Familia. She tells him the story of how her Familia was attacked and killed, and how she had to avenge the deaths of her only family before she was taken care of by Mamma Mia. Hearing this, Belle consoles her, and before she leaves, he tells her not to look down on herself as it is not good for her. Calmed by his words, Ryu holds Belle's hands and tells him he is a good human. Later that night, while Mord and the other adventurers are drinking some grape juice, Mord tells the rest of the adventurers how he wants to teach Belle a lesson because he has always been full of himself. The following morning, Beat attacks Belle and tries to beat him up for peeping at Eyes while she was taking her bath, but the Amazon girls carry him away, while he yells at them to let him go. There, Belle sees Eyes, who tells him she is already leaving as she is part of the party that is to leave first. Unknown to Belle, Hestia was watching while he had the conversation with Eyes, which gets her angry. But all of a sudden, she gets grabbed and taken away from her room.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Later, Belle enters Hestia's room and gets shocked after seeing a letter from Mord that he should come alone to the lone crystal if he wants to see her again. Immediately, Belle runs to the crystal, and when he gets there, he sees Mord and the other adventurers, and Mord tells him they should have a duel, which if he wins, he would be able to save his goddess, but if he does not win, he must do anything he says, and Belle agrees. As the duel begins, Mord immediately uses a magical power to become invincible,
Wait a minute!
which confuses Belle as Mord begins to beat him up. Meanwhile, Hermes watches this from afar until all of a sudden, Bel's party arrives, and they begin to fight with the other adventurers. Suddenly, Bel begins to feel Mord's aura, and he is able to block and attack him. Eventually, Bel wins the duel, while Lily goes to release Hestia. On getting to where the duel takes place, Hestia immediately releases her powers, which shocks all the adventurers. Hestia stops her powers and immediately goes to meet Bel to ask him if he is okay. Suddenly, they all begin to hear a huge earthquake and begins to wonder what is going on, as the adventurers watch a huge man-like monster, whom they recognize as the floor boss, suddenly emerge. Seeing this, Bel tells his teammates that they would have to save the others, which makes Ryu ask him if he wants to fight with his whole team, and he tells her they would all fight together. He puts Chigusa in charge of Hestia, while he and the other members of his party fight with the floor boss. Bel and his party members begin to fight with the floor boss, but Andromeda goes to meet Morris and tells him that they all need to defeat the floor boss if they want to get out of the dungeon. Because of this, Morris immediately instructs the men to gather all the weapons they can get, as they will all attack and defeat the floor boss. Meanwhile, Ryu and some members of Bel's party, who are attaching the floor boss, are only able to bring it down on one knee. As Ryu sees that the floor boss is more powerful than they can imagine, she immediately tells the adventurers to withdraw. Andromeda and Ryu communicate telepathically and tell each other that they would have to keep the floor boss busy, so that the rest of the adventurers would be able to focus their powers on it. To get this done, they all focus their attention on the floor boss, and they are able to hit it. But to their surprise, they see that the floor boss monster can regenerate itself. Suddenly, the floor boss begins to launch attacks at the adventurers, and at that moment also calls out one other small lobsters as well. Seeing this, Ryu immediately tells Bel to ask the other adventurers to kill the smaller monsters, while they try to weaken the floor boss. Meanwhile, Oka watches as the other members of the party fight with the floor boss, and immediately tells Chigusa to give him a shield, because he cannot sit while his teammates are risking their lives. Immediately, Bel goes to the floor boss, and he uses his magical power to hit the monster, but he gets hit by the monster too. Then suddenly, when the monster tries to attack Bel again, Oka uses his shield to block the attack from the floor boss. In the process, Oka and Bel suddenly fall down, and they both become unconscious. There, Hestia tells Ryu that Bel would stand up and defeat the floor boss, but unknown to them, Bel is able to hear them as he tells himself he cannot open his eyes or move his body. Knowing what's going on, Hermes goes to where Bel is and begins to say what Bel's grandfather had once told him. Immediately, Bel wakes up as he tells himself that he has to fight for his goddess, his comrades and eyes. Meanwhile, Ryu and Andromeda begins to cast a huge spell as they all focus their magic to make the floor boss weak, in order for Bel to attack it. To get the job done, Bel takes a sword and channels all of his powers into the sword, then proceeds to hit the floor boss. Seeing this, everyone becomes shocked that Bel's attack has a huge impact on the floor boss, as they could now see half of the monster's gem. Suddenly, Bel uses his sword to hit the gem, which makes him able to defeat the floor boss totally without it regenerating itself.
Oh my god! Wow!
Also, Oka wakes up and all of the adventurers begin to leap for joy as Bel has saved them from the floor boss. Then, Mort tells himself that Bel is not like what he thought after all. Happily, Hermes begins to yell that Bel is the last hero given to them by the gods, and he is able to witness it. Then, he also adds that the wheels of history are turning, as their children would be able to tell the tale of the white-haired hero. If you have watched this recap till now, you'll definitely enjoy the story of Kiaru, who is an incredible yet disgusting loner, with the power to heal any being, hell-bent on revenge against some enemies from his past life, who made his life unbearable. He is ready to do anything to make them pay. Want to know more? Check out our last recap and find out.